Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this talk on multiculturalism from theory to practice. My name is Mary Meineke, and I will be discussing with you today, sharing with you ideas, tips, and activities that have worked for me in my classroom. First of all, a little bit of background on me. I grew up in Houston in a comfortable middle-class neighborhood. I knew English. I learned a little bit of Spanish. I thought I was really an open, multicultural person. I interacted with different people from different countries, races, religions, languages. But really, it was until much later in life that I discovered how little I really knew about multiculturalism. I took a few classes on multiculturalism, but really, it was until 20 years ago when I moved to Mexico and started living, working, breathing, eating in a different culture that I discovered how little I really knew about other cultures. So this presentation is a work in progress. I want to share with you some activities you can use with your students. And one of the first activities we will talk about is really identifying analyzing, reflecting on who you are. According to Banks and Allport, to be really in touch with your own identity and to understand how your own identity can affect how people can see you. Luckily for all of you out there today, there is an increased awareness of multiculturalism in the world due to current world events. And teachers all around the world have been sharing resources, activities, ideas, books, literature with all of us today. If you go online, you can find a world of activities. So, welcome to this conference on multiculturalism from theory and practice. Let's go ahead and get started. I would like to share my screen with you now. Here we go. Multiculturalism from theory to practice. My name is Mary Meineke, and I work at the Universidad de Monterrey. Here is my email, mary.meineke@udem.edu. All of your comments, feedback, ideas, suggestions are always welcome. First of all, let's think back and say, hey, how many languages can you say hello in? How many languages can you say hello in? 2, 3, 4, 5 languages maybe? Globalization. What has been happening in the world these last 20 years? We have an increased flow of knowledge, people, trade, information across all borders. Now, what is our goal for our students? Our goal for our students is for them to have the skills and knowledge of a culture in order to work with individuals of a culture. You need to recognize, appreciate, and value differences to be able to effectively work with individuals of different cultures. Now let's backtrack a little bit. I would like to discuss a little bit about stereotypes and biases. And let's think back, well, at what age do children develop stereotypes? At what age? Any ideas out there? 2, 3, 5 years old? At what age do you think children develop stereotypes? Well, in preschoolers, it's very normal for them to notice and ask about differences. And preschool is when children start to categorize and classify things. They classify it into small, big, large, round, square. What research says, if you look here in the middle under point number 4, if you see, babies start to notice race as early as 3 to 6 months old. And children by the ages of 3 to 5 start to apply stereotypes. By the ages of 8 to 9, children can help each other, classmates, and peers reduce their stereotypes and prejudices. This is why it's so important to be aware of this for you preschool and elementary school teachers. You in your classroom can make a difference. And one of the first things to look at is, what is culture? What is culture? What are the components of culture? What makes up culture? Georgetown University lists culture as thoughts, communications, languages, practices, beliefs, values, customs, manners of interacting, relationships, behaviors. What else is a part of culture? Because there are still a few more things that are not listed on the slide. Here are some more that were not mentioned, such as working schedules, language, food, celebrations, and look at the bottom, jokes. Jokes are definitely a big difference, especially as I can see from 2 different cultures. What else is a part of culture? There are other more parts that are not listed here, components such as sense of time, role of women. A great way to talk about culture is to talk with your students on what are the components and aspects of culture. Now, as I mentioned before, and also mentioned by several authors such as Banks and Allport, first, it's your self-identity to understand your own culture. Understand your own culture. Have an idea of your own thoughts about your own culture. There's an activity that I ask my students to do, and I ask them these 3 questions. I ask them to answer these questions individually about what do they think or feel about Mexican culture or whatever country they're from. How do they define Mexican culture? If a person from another country asks you to describe your home country, what would you say? It's a way to start thinking about your own thoughts. I even ask my students to insert their image, their GIF or meme that best represents their culture. And now I would like to share with you what my students said. Here's what Lourdes said. This is the image that she chose. It's a great choice of an image. Here is what Jimena said, as we remember from the soccer game against Holland a few years ago. No era penal. Jimena describes that we are passionate for our culture, sports teams, and traditions. Natalia, this is what she chose, to say that it's a warm place and people collaborate as a community. And this is what Daniela said about Mexico. She says, I feel that Mexican culture is amazing and very different from the other ones. So, like I said, the first step, students look at their individual culture, they do it individually. Second step, they get together in groups and they compare their thoughts to see how diverse are their ideas about the culture of their home country. And this is one of the first steps where they begin to see, okay, we all have different points of view. There are some things that we share in common, but you know what? Jimena and Daniela and Pedro, well, we have a little bit of different thoughts of what we think about Mexico. So this is a great activity to start to compare our ideas. I'm going to share my screen again. Here we go. Activity number 2, this is also one of my favorites, called an identity diagram. And it's basically an who am I activity. Who am I? Also, again, the first step, analyze, reflect. Who are you? This is where I go back to, as everyone can remember, Shrek and Donkey, one of my favorite movies. And in one of the movies, I think it's Shrek number 1, Shrek says, there is a lot more to ogres than people think. Ogres are like onions. Layers. Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thought. We all have different layers, different components of our personality. One way you can have students to do their identity, you can have a mind map or conceptual map with circles to choose the significant parts of who you are, or the important parts, or how you would describe yourself to someone else. Another way, this is one of my favorites, is an onion, because I love Shrek and onions have layers. I give my students this virtual onion and I say, hey, you are like an onion. You have different identities. Let's just peel back the layers of the onion to see your different identities. And here are some of the things I want to share with you, some of the things my students have said. Here are 2 different students who've shared their identities. Up on the top of the slide, you can see that this person put woman, thin, student, leader, creative, religion, faith, passion, people I love. And I love how she put in the very middle, my biggest dream and my fears. She put that in the very, very center of the onion. And I thought that was just so, so beautiful. Here is another way. Some of my other students chose to do it as this map of social and personal identities. You can make it as complex or as simple as you want. It can be adapted from elementary school, junior high, high school, and college. This is an activity I did with my college students. And now that the students have done their onions, their layers, just like Shrek, I asked them to reflect on their identities. I asked them to reflect, and these are some questions you can ask. I'll leave them up here for a moment for you to take a screenshot or to read through them. And this is just a way for the students to say, hey, Which parts of your identity are important to you? Which are meaningful to you? Which are not meaningful to you? Which do you choose? Which does society choose? And the students really begin to analyze and reflect and say, hey, you know, who am I? Who am I? Here, it's good to see us all again. Give me one moment here. Let's go ahead and move to the next part of our presentation. I'm going to go ahead. I will share my screen again. Here we go. Next aspect we call cultural specific and cultural general learning. What is that? Specific and general. Well, this is just a different way to see how we're all different. Let me show you. We have what we call cultural, personal, and universal. Cultural, personal, universal. Here's an example. Let's try this quiz. For example, number 1, eating with chopsticks. Would you choose that as universal? Everyone around the world eats with chopsticks? No, that's not universal. Would you choose for number 1, cultural, eating with chopsticks? Certain people from certain countries use chopsticks to eat with? Yes, cultural. Number 2, women walking 5 steps behind men. Is that a personal choice, cultural, or universal? Well, that's to a specific country, so that would be cultural. Number 3, walking rather than riding the bus. There could be multiple options there, but I could say on number 3, usually is personal. It's my personal choice that maybe I want to walk 1 kilometer down to go to the OXXO rather or in place of riding the bus. Let's take a look at the rest. Here are the answers. Like I said, some of these could be multiple answers depending on the situation you give it. Let's go ahead and move on because there's a ton of information in this presentation and I want to give you the most amount of information I can in this short time. Now, you as a second language teacher, what is culture for you? The goals of culture in the classroom are three basic goals, and I'm basing a lot of this on James A. Banks. Number 1, raise awareness. Number 2, increase understanding and knowledge. And number 3, develop skills. Goal. We've shortened this to RAV. Recognize, accept, and value. The first step is recognizing that we are different. The second step, which these all take time, are accepting cultural differences. And somewhere along the way, along our path of learning and opening us up to other cultures and other languages, are also value cultural differences. Recognize, accept, and value. Those are our 3 main goals of teaching culture in the classroom. Now, there is a professor from University of Texas, Dr. Thomas Garza, and he mentioned that, well, you have the 4 skills of reading, writing, speaking, listening. And he says, well, what about culture? And he proposes that culture is the 5th skill. And I agree with him. Culture is the 5th skill. An important part of learning a language is knowing how to use it and valuing that culture. Also, he mentions that language without cultural relevance is nearly useless. Yet successfully teaching the culture element in our foreign language classroom remains a challenge. We should integrate culture into part of our language instruction. Culture is this alive, fluid, constantly changing concept. For more resources, great resources, please take a screenshot. Here's the Center for Open Educational Resources and Language Learning from the University of Texas. Now, culture is the 5th skill. As I've said before, recognize, accept, and value. The first step to recognize, well, I recognize that in a greeting, maybe I kiss, or I shake hands, or I bow. I recognize that the greeting is different. The second step, as we move along our learning journey, is to accept that difference. When I meet this new person, I know I must kiss them twice, once on the right cheek, once on the left cheek. I've recognized, I've accepted, I'll do it. The third and last step, sometimes we reach, sometimes we do not, is to value culture differences. Wow, that is really interesting. I have to shake hands or kiss or bow when I meet this new person. Now, let's move to the next topic. Cultural relativity. Cultural relativity. I would like to share a short video right now that shows breakfast around the world to help to explain this topic. Give me a moment to share my screen. I'm looking forward to meeting each of you at this end of this presentation for any questions, comments, doubts. Give me one moment to share my screen again. And this is a very short, I believe it is a 90-second video. Take a look, watch the video, and determine which looks like the best or most delicious breakfast. What about that video? Looks delicious, doesn't it? Great looking breakfast from many different countries. How does that relate to cultural relativity? Well, my idea of breakfast and your idea of breakfast can be different. It is the same word, breakfast, but maybe my idea of breakfast is scrambled eggs and toast and orange juice, and your idea of breakfast might be tacos or chilaquiles or many of the other delicious breakfasts there are. Notice it's the same word, the exact same word, but our ideas associated with that word are all different. I will share my screen again to share this presentation with you. Cultural relativity. Here's what I just said. My idea of breakfast and your idea of breakfast can be completely different, but yet we use the same word. This is something to be very aware of in teaching a second or foreign language. Also related to this is cultural relativism. We should try to understand cultural practices of other groups in their own cultural context. If you see on the bottom of the slide, we see an eye. It's like you're looking through the eyes of another person to see the food, the dress, the breakfast through the viewpoint of another person. For example, instead of thinking, oh, look at that breakfast on the top. Oh, that looks to be squid, live squid or octopus up there. Oh, that just looks gross and disgusting. I could never eat that. So instead of thinking that, you should think instead or ask, hey, why do some cultures eat live or different food? And being open to other cultures, open to multiculturalism, you may learn that eating live octopus has many health benefits and has several excellent vitamins and minerals. This is being open to other cultures, trying to see it, as I showed you up here, from a different point of view. Activity number 3. What is beauty? Let's go ahead and move on to activity number 3 that you could use in your classroom. This is an activity I have my students do in groups. I say you have 5 or 10 minutes to find 5 pictures of what beauty means to you. Given that this is a short presentation and we're going to run out of time, I'm going to go ahead and advance, but the idea is that you would find a partner and find what beauty means to you. Here's what my students chose. Here's what group number 1 chose. They chose a forest, sunflowers, pizza, stars, a dog, a beach. Remember some of these pictures. Group number 2, they chose a smile, a beach. I'm hungry, so I see these delicious tacos up here that look absolutely wonderful. We also have a beach and a dog. Group number 3, this is what they chose. And group number 4. A beautiful picture up on the top of Saddle Mountain here in Monterrey, Nuevo León. Now, these are my students' ideas, and here's group number 5. This is an excellent way to discuss our different ideas of beauty. And this discussion also led us to compare some similarities. We started discussing how when they chose dogs, we seem to all have the same breed of dog. If you notice here, it looks to be a yellow Labrador. And also here. Also here, we saw many forests and beaches. We discussed beauty, how they chose babies. This discussion also led us to talking about how the searching online and different search engines could direct us to the same pictures, because we were kind of amazed how when they searched on the internet, we came up with many similar pictures. So this discussion led us to discuss actually two topics. First, their different concepts of beauty. Second, how the internet search engines guided us to some very similar pictures. To be aware that search engines can give you the same results and can guide you or influence in the pictures you see. Remember, different cultures have different ideas on the representation of beauty. Next topic, big C versus little c. What is this topic about? Big C, big culture versus little culture. This is a topic from 1976 from a author named Hall, Edward T. Hall. And he's the one that coined or developed this iceberg analogy of culture. That there are some visible parts of a culture and some hidden parts, such as you see here. Big C are the visible parts of the cultural iceberg, such as behaviors and practices, and little c are the more invisible or not so observable parts of culture. Examples of big C are visible things such as holidays, arts, literature, food, and architecture. These are the things that we can use our 5 senses to hear, see, touch, smell, and taste. And then we have the more invisible things that it's a little bit more difficult to observe, the little c culture. In here we include body language, communication styles, cultural norms, behavior, myths, and legends. Activity number 4 I have for you today is to create a list. Create a list of examples of big C and little c. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you here again. I'm just checking on the time so we don't go over the time. Here are examples from my students. Actually, here is a quiz. Which do you think is big C and which do you think is little c? Big C are visible things such as architecture, dress, holidays. Here we chose little c such as body language and behaviors. Although the picture of the girl with her two hands together, we could maybe say it was dress or behaviors. So we would have to clarify what we are referring to here. The girl with her hands together, I'm referring to her behaviors. So that's why I called it little c. And big C are on the other side of the screen, such as dress, holidays, and architecture. So let's go ahead and test your knowledge. Give me one moment. I'm having a technological error here. Hi guys, let's go ahead and move to our quiz for today. Let's see how much we remember, how much we learned. I will share my screen. Here we go. Let's test your knowledge. Good luck. Question number 1. What are the goals of culture in the classroom? Raise awareness, increase understanding and knowledge, develop skills. Those are the goals of culture in the classroom. Let's go ahead to question number 2. What is culture? Here are some of the aspects or components of culture. Hopefully you have at least 5 or 6 of these. Question number 3. Name activities to help teach culture. Name activities. Which ones did I just present? So here are activities that can help you teach culture. For more activities, I highly recommend these sites, especially the Plurimobile project. It has a wonderful list of activities to be used with preschool, elementary, junior high, high school students. And I also recommend, if you want to talk about different viewpoints, here on the bottom of the slide is the true story of the 3 little pigs as told by the big bad wolf. If you look on YouTube or Google, you can easily find that. And it's a great way for the kids to see the story of the three little pigs told from a different point of view. So remember, Rav, respect, appreciate, and value. Well, I'd like to go one step further, as James A. Banks mentions that the teacher is a cultural mediator and a change agent. In conclusion, you are a cultural mediator and a change agent. You have the power to change your students' beliefs and to make the world a better place. I look forward to seeing you in the questions and comments section after this presentation. Thanks, guys, for watching. One last thing I forgot. Here's my contact information again in case you need it. Always some sort of tech thing. Here we go. Here are some of the sources. I'll give you a moment if you'd like to take a screenshot, and thanks so much for watching. Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon.